Okay, so today I'm going to show you how a way of creating augmented reality applications using a tool called Aframe and an extension to Aframe called Aframe XR, which is relatively new. So the Aframe, you can check it out at this site. Basically, Aframe itself is meant for WebVR, and you can get all kinds of component additions to it, checking out their component repository. And basically it just lets you open up and create these WebGL based 3D applications. The Aframe XR is an extension to Aframe that lets you use things like Apple's AR Kit or the Web AR Core from Google that on certain browsers will allow you to do augmented reality apps. So, and Aframe itself uses this declarative language similar to HTML. You can go and check out these sites, GitHub's Mozilla Aframe XR, Aframe itself, Aframe.io. And then in order to display these, you need your own, you need a customized web browser, which will eventually, all web browsers will support this, but for now you need one that you can download for your iOS devices is Mozilla's mixed reality browser called let's see, it's called let's see. This is a picture of how it works in terms of what it looks like. You can see the AR Kit cores, but the browser itself is called AR XR Viewer, Mozilla XR Viewer. You can check out the app stores to find that. It's got this icon, so it's hard to miss. So anyway, let's get into it. What I did was I downloaded, just to start, I downloaded the Aframe XR, the entire repository from the GitHub, because it's going to have some examples to start with. And that's a good place to start because Aframe itself has this neat little viewer, like a kind of a game engine type world builder, where if you're in an Aframe window, which means you can see Aframe content, if you hold down on a PC, I'm not sure what the key command would be on the Mac, but it's Control-Alt-I. It will take you into this little world building scene that'll allow you to customize the objects within that scene and go and clone them and duplicate them. You can export as GLTF format or HTML. You can save copy the entire HTML to clipboard. And you can even open these motion capture development tools, which I'm not sure what that is yet, but I'll get into that maybe in a different video. And then here's a list of all the components that you can add. There's a lot more than this actually. You just have to go, you'd have to include them in the code for the HTML. So let's go, and what I'm going to show you in this video today is how to take this tool and basically construct a scene and then export it so that you don't have to go and do a bunch of A-frame coding or know all of this, the component terminology, because this is just a nicer interface for it. So I'm using left mouse to rotate around the camera view, which we're going to get into, the right mouse button to drag, and then you can mouse wheel to zoom in. Alright, so in order to start playing around with this, we do at least have to open up some Aframe code. I mean, you could do it from just going to the Aframe site and hit Control-Alt-I and get in here and delete these and then start adding scenes. But it's probably better to go ahead and just set up your own little development environment for the XR stuff, because you're going to need the distribution packages, this Aframe XR.js, and you're also going to want to have access, at least for now. Eventually you'll have to include Aframe, the Aframe repository or the Aframe source, but you're going to want this Aframe-master.js, and I'm not sure about the map, but you're going to want this as well, and you'll see it in the code. So if you download this entire repository, just clone and download it, and then create a folder on your machine. It'll look like this, which is basically what we saw on the GitHub. And if you open this index within the repository, you're going to get these WebXR examples. These will, the XR specifically will at least display on a standard browser. That's the way A-Frame tends to work. Is it's going to want to have access to your camera and things like that, at least for the AR stuff on your device, which is why you need a specific browser for it, and the ARKit stuff as well. But for the XR, if you click on that, it will display. Because I'm opening it from my local, and this is what this example does. Is basically it'll display certain objects within certain devices, and you can see one of the things I've noticed, at least on a computer, is that when you click on the content, it takes over your mouse, and if you want to get it back, you have to hit escape to get out of that control. But this WebEx, it's also got the VR content, so if you click VR, and you have a headset, or an XR headset, you'll be able to turn around and see it in virtual reality as well. So that's how you get to these actual XR AR examples. What we're going to do is go in and actually edit some examples. So in this repository that we've downloaded from Aframe XR, you'll go into the examples folder. You'll see an XR and an AR example. We'll go into the AR examples in this light, and I've already made a couple of modifications. So this index.html is the one I want to show you. You can edit that with whatever text editor you have. I like Notepad++ or Notepad++. So I'll open that and show you what it looks like. I've got my fonts set big for this particular video just so you can see what we're playing around with. So I've gone and created a bunch of objects using the A-Frame building toolkit that I showed you earlier. The A-Frame inspector is what they call it. So I'm going to delete that content out, and I'm going to reset this scale to 1. And I'll show you the reasons for these modifications. But this is standard A-Frame code. So you've got, the way A-Frame works is you have to have an A scene. And then within that A scene, you can have A assets, which will allow you to import models with textures and things like that. You're also going to have this A entity a lot. And an A entity is just any kind of 3D object. And the way you identify those objects is giving them an ID, and then they can have a position, a scale, and a bunch of other, like a material, a bunch of other things. The way this particular example works for the Aframe XR is that it's setting up this A entity reticle, and that's going to become this little kind of like a cursor type finder, so that when the Aframe XR using AR toolkit from Apple finds an actual surface to start displaying content on, it will it'll show this reticle. If you click, then it's going to place this diorama, this thing that we call the diorama, at the reticle's location, and then you can browse around it using your phone's positional data. This script is basically all the code that executes that. So it's setting up a query selector for AR scene, it's a query selector for diorama, and the reticle, and then some events, an event listener for touching on the device. And then when that event happens, it'll actually go and set the attribute of the position for the reticle, wherever the reticle is at, and when it's been clicked. It'll set the diorama's position to that position and turn its visibility on in the world. Okay, I know that's a lot, but you'll see it. We're going to show an example of it once it's finished. But for now, I've just blanked out this scene. It's going to be there is nothing in the diorama. If you look at the original example coming off of the Aframe XR site, it's going to have this GL GLTF model, which is the standard modeling format now. It'll have an assets file for that and load it up, which looks like a little 3D city. What I want to do is show you how to make content using the A-frame inspector. So we're going to save this as a blank scene. The other thing you have to be aware of is that right now this file is searching out to the vendor where I pointed out the A-frame master.js. You have to have that loaded first, and then it's going to want to load this modification to it using the A-frame XR JS, which is out in the repository from the GitHub that we've downloaded. So that would be in here. So here's our vendor, and here's our dist. So then let's get into the code, and I'll show you how to modify and create models. So go into lights. I've got that open here. So in order to edit this, it's rather than just going and typing in code, we could go in and put like a entity and give it a bunch of different things, but you'd have to know the code for that. It's easier if you just open this index.html, whichever one you want to is blanked out. Open with Google Chrome. And it's going to come up blank. You notice that it's trying to load some A-frame content. Everything's invisible because it's not able to find, using ARKit, it's not able to find a plane, so it sort of stops and doesn't really work here. But we don't really care. All we really want to do is get to Control-Alt-I to get to the world viewer. I have to hit escape so I can get my cursor back because I clicked on the window. And now we're in this A-frame viewer, and you can see here's our diorama. It's turned off visible, but it's empty. Actually, it's not empty because I've put some models in there, but I thought I'd cleared that out. Maybe I didn't save it. The point is we're going to be making this little puzzle where it looks like a bunch of random objects, but if you look at it from the right position, it spells out the word thanks. So we're sort of making this spatial puzzle that you'll be able to browse around in, and it takes a minute to find it. You'll be able to browse around using just moving the phone around and looking for the way to line these objects up, and it'll end up spelling out the word thanks if you get it from the right view. Let me go back a little. And over. It's hard to get it to line up after I did it. Anyway, we're going to get into building that. And right now that's all nested, a bunch of objects that are nested under the diorama, which is the stuff that I deleted from the file. But let me check that file and make sure that I saved it because I want it to come up empty. Yeah, so I need to save this. I probably didn't save it, this index.html. So if I saved it, now I open that up with Chrome. You can do it in Firefox too. And then Control-Alt-I. And now hit escape to get our cursor. Turn on this, yeah, now it's empty. So I'd forgotten to save the file now. So when you look, diorama is not a series of nested objects. All right, so if we want to start making objects in this, we can just go and click on the plus here, add new entity. It's called A entity. And over here, if you select that, it's empty right now. It's just a positional node that's empty. You can give it an ID. We'll call this a letter, so T, or yeah, letter T. And the IDs are simply for targeting purposes in code if you want to do something later. And if you want to give this an actual shape, you have to give it some geometry. So you go under Add Component, and then select Geometry, and the first option's a box. So you can see the box there now. And right now it shades really flat in terms of the color because it doesn't have a material on the box. So if you want to give it a look, you can add a component. And let's see, material. And when you do that, suddenly you get this shaded mode. It's just a flat white right now, so you can change the color. And the shader that it gives is based on physically accurate rendering shading. So you can do all kinds of things with it. You can add maps for reflectivity and have it have a reflection map. You can give it some ambient occlusion. You can change the color, so we'll make it red. And you can make it emissive, give it kind of a glow so that it doesn't get dark on the edges if you want it to be like a light shape or a neon sign. If you wanted to add the environment map, there's two ways to add an environment map. There's a environment map which would want to be a cube map, and then there's this spherical environment map, which is another option, which would be an equirectangular map. So if you give it this, and then if you wanted just like a source, the source here is actually just like a texture map if you want to put a texture on it. So if you just want to see what that looks like, you can say, you click on that map, load texture, and you get a bunch of these different texture options that are just defaults depending on what's on your machine. Let's try this grass dirt PNG and just say load this texture. Let's see, did it go? Nope. Load texture. Sometimes I have issues getting these from the web. No, it's not going to load that one. For some reason it's a broken link. Let's try this one. Nope. Try choosing a file from my machine. Let's see. You can just drag and drop a file here. Let me see if there's a texture in these examples, maybe. If we go out to, probably an assets here. It's a GLT. Here's a PNG. Let's see what that looks like. All right, that'll work for now. It's just a PNG. So if we open up the browser, and then make this window small so I can drag it. So drag that in. It's going to load that texture. Load that. Maybe I'm doing this wrong. Hold on a sec. Load texture. Choose file. Oh wait. Let's try one of these and see if from URL and press enter. For some reason I'm running into an issue with the load texture, and it could be because I'm doing it from a non hosted page. Let's see. Let me try loading this one because I should be able to at least do it from the desktop. Drag that. It loads. Choose. Nope. Usually if I set load that texture, it'll load it up, but for some reason it's not. Let's try the environment map, see. Yeah, something's going on because I'm running it from the local. I think if you go into, let's see, where I was loading it from here, if I go and select one of these entities, let's try the sphere and try loading a map from the source on that. Load texture, let's do one of these bricks. Something's going on with the viewer. It's like I'm missing something in terms of the close this. You should be able to load a map here. The way you can do it is if you, in the A assets, if you load an image, you can just, it'll show and give it an ID. You can just type the ID in these little text fields and that'll set it. Normally, I've not had problems with loading maps. It might just be this version of A-Frame that has an issue with it, but play around with that. That's how you load your image maps, using these image samplers, and you can see it pops it up, but for some reason it's just not loading. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and close this window and then go back to the one I was working on, because we don't really care about image maps for the purposes of this example. Alright, so one other thing to understand is that each one of these grid squares is considered a meter. So right now, when I pop this into the world, this cube, it's going to be like 2 meters by 2 meters size in terms of the cube size, which is pretty big. So just so that we can see it, easily browse around this word that we're going to create, this word puzzle, I'm going to scale it small, and so right now it'd be less than a meter and like a couple meters tall, which is still too tall. So I'm going to make it tiny and small. So since I call this the letter T, I want to make a T. And in order to do that, I just take this entity and let's see, what's the ref size there? So it's a meter, which if I spell this out in a word, it's going to be like probably 5 meters across. Gives you a little bit of room, but I'm in a small office, so I want to make it even smaller. Yeah, that'll work. So it's like a foot. Now I'll take that T and move it over here, and then I'm just going to duplicate that or clone this entity using this little clone entity icon here, and it doesn't seem to do anything, but it's made a second letter T, and I can rotate. If I hold down, if I hit the E on the keyboard, I'll get this widget for rotation, and I can just rotate it flat and then move that up to the top to make the letter T, or capital T. And that'll be, these will be my letter T shapes. Now if I want to, I can take that original letter T and just clone that again. And then actually I should probably make a base for each letter, so let me delete this. I'm going to delete the top bar. I'm going to clone this letter T the second time here, and I'm going to scroll up and call it letter H, and then move that off here. So I can start like one part for each letter, and then that way when I go and do these clones, because I can't change the order of the objects here on this in the inspector, I'll have them all relative to each other load-wise, so it'll be easier to edit later if we wanted to edit it in code. So that'll be the this will be the base for the T. This will be the left side bar of the H. I'll duplicate that again. I'm going to call this letter A, and we'll pull that over, and I'll give it a little bit of a, I won't give it any rotation right now because I want to keep the vertical. So we'll call that letter A, and we're just out of position right now. So clone that one, and I'll call it letter N. I'm going to spell out the word thanks. Pull that N over. It's the left side of the N, and then we'll clone it again. Call that K. That'll be the left side of the K, and then the last one will be an S. Clone that. And we'll pull it over. So I'm going to pan using the right mouse button. Yeah, if you're on a laptop, good luck trying to get this kind of manipulation going, because mice just work better, especially for 3D things. So now I can start, go back to the letter T. I can clone that and create my top bar the way I did before. So if I hit E and rotate, And I'm just sort of eyeballing it right now. You can also go up here and set the rotation in one of these channels, so you can like grab that and drag. But I find, because of the way the rotation, so you notice like this 1.2, where is it here? Yeah, there's my letter T top, we'll call it. The rotation can be hard to keep track of if you try to do it by the numbers here, because you can see like I've got this 90, and then I want to set this to 0 there, that way it's square. And what I noticed is you can grab here, but you can't select. If you want to select, you can't even really select. These are your other manipulators. If you want to get it without having to do the keyboard, you can click them up here. But you have to select which one you want to manipulate in the left bar here. So I'm going to pull that up, and I'm going to scale it a little bit. Then we can take the H, and we will duplicate or clone that. W, I'll pull that over, and then I'm going to clone that again. And I'll rotate. W, and scale it to fit. Yep. Okay. Then take the A, and what I want to do to start this A is just start it at a rotation like that. I'll clone that, and then take the other one in the opposite way to make it sort of an X, and then I'll move that over. Then I'll have to start moving my N to the right. Same thing with the S. Alright, so my A, and let's make it a little narrower. There we go. And then I'll duplicate it one more time to make the crossbar. Now you can also model this, you can go into a 3D modeling package and model these shapes and just import them as an asset to do this. But what I'm trying to show you is that you don't need to have 3D knowledge or a 3D package to create content for A-Frame. You can go ahead and just place things in the world using all these primitives coming from the inspector itself, because it's just mathematically generated geometry. Alright, so then we'll do the N, move this over. I'm going to duplicate that, and one more, and I'll do on the diagonal. Yeah, and then the K, duplicate that, and R to scale it, and then move it up. So if you wanted to move it up, straight off the edge like that, you can set this local, and then that'll change the widget tool so you can shift it like that. Sometimes that can be helpful for positioning objects. And then we can duplicate that K again and create the leg. We'll rotate. And I'm going to turn off local just so I can bring this down. Then change it to local so I can scale it. Alright, and then the S. Now the S gets tricky because it's going to be a lot of parts, so I'm going to just scale the top part, and it's going to be a blocky S. So we'll scale this and pull that down, put it over here. And then I'll duplicate it again to create the tops. So we'll rotate and position it. Just to get it roughly this. We're going to end up changing these shapes based on moving them and scrambling the word after we get this thing spelled out with the parts that we need. So one more down. Alright, so now we have the word thanks that lines up perfectly and is in space. And if we want to scramble it, what we do is we find the position that we're going to want to see this from in order to spell out the word thanks. I suggest getting low like this and sort of seeing it from an angle. And then you can go and select these letters and just grab them and start moving them in space so that they'll only line up from a certain perspective. So you can select this. So like right now I've moved that top T bar back. I can go and then scale that to make it bigger to seem like it would fit with this particular perspective. But it will look out of shape. It'll look very different than if you're not looking at it from this perspective. But it seems to line up here, and that's the view. So what I just did was I moved that back to separate it. And I suggest not moving your view angle too much until you get the separations kind of locked. So here's the left bar for the H. So if I move that forward, and all this works based on perspective. So I'm doing that. So now that's forward, and then this bar can go back a lot. I want to make it really big. Now this will work because if there was a ground plane, this bar would not finish. It would be, you can see I've moved it so far back that it will collide with whatever ground plane you have. But because this is composited on top of, in AR, this is composited on top of whatever image is in the on the phone, it'll work because you're not going to be cropping the bottoms of these parts out. You'll just see them from different perspectives, and they'll seem like they're floating in space, or they'll be sitting on the ground, but they'll be projecting down through the ground, if that makes sense. You'll see what I mean when I actually show you an example of it playing. So I'm just going to move that bar back a little bit and scale it up. I'm just trying to keep the thicknesses, because changing the thickness helps to change, so make it harder to actually figure out the right perspective to see this from. So I'm going to pull this one way forward, and it's set for local, so I need to. So one of the things you'll see here is like you can take this to a certain point, and then you can also select these flat planes, and it'll just shift along the plane that way until you can find the right view. So we'll select R. Then I can change it to local. Actually, I want to scale it. Get off local here. Let's make it thinner and then longer. And then we can shift forward. I'm just trying to keep the separation from the H here. It takes a little play to get this to work. R. So now maybe I can make this H. I can go back and select the second letter of the H and shift that just a little bit to the left to thin it up. All right, so there's our A. Let me make sure. Yeah, I still need to Yeah, you could leave like part of a letter like that as a hint if you wanted, or you can separate that too. So I'll probably go ahead and separate that. Move this part back. Or actually I'll leave the this bar, and I'll shift the center back and lower. Then I can do the N. Probably, yeah, let's move that back and then this way. And we'll scale it up. Back to the end here. And accidentally shifted the letters a little bit. So you have to be careful about how you select. Then let's make this one go back to notice I'm going really slow trying to get this bar because it's like hard to select through one. Whoops. I can just grab this and move it there. Just got to be careful not to lift it too much. We'll shift it back more and then across, and we can scale it. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And then I can take this diagonal and move it forward and make it smaller. That'll work. Okay, now the K. Let's see. And the cool thing is when you get this part built, you can actually hide this and make it even more convoluted by putting extra blank shapes that have slightly different colors or whatever, kind of like a tree in the woods, and make it so that they obscure these parts a little bit more and make it harder to sort of, it's like noise, adding extra noise to the problem. I'll show you some examples of that when we get done with this part. And scale that. Now you can have these parts just sort of floating in space, obviously, but you could also take them and obscure them even further by making them part of something else, like connecting them over and making it sort of be this sculpture that could be welded or something like that, so it looks like this contiguous line, but it only lines up from certain perspectives. I've done that in the past and it works really well. But let me see the separation. So yeah, you can see how it's starting to get scrambled until you see it from the right perspective. Let's go back to where we were. Yep. But it's tricky lining them up because, like, you can also make it to where, like, if we had a bar that connected from one to another, it might, if it was the exact same color, it would obscure the actual shape that we're trying to see. So I suggest like making multicolored object and basically getting this perspective and then dropping other shapes in there and giving them different colors and moving them in ways that make it harder to see these letter forms from certain perspectives, but then when you see them from this perspective, they'll be kind of obvious. Even if stuff's blocking them out, it'll be semi-obscured. I'll show you that in a minute. So let's get our letter shape for the S. And let's see, yeah, S2, make that go back. It's good. This can go back a little bit. Actually, let's make this one come forward just a little bit, and then move it back into place. This one can be forward a lot. I'm just moving it a little bit at a time. R, scale it. And then pull it down. Make it a little shorter. Alright, and then the last one, we can move that like way back here. And scale it up then. All right, so there's our letters to line up, and you can see they're all over the place now. So from any other angle, except for maybe backwards, but you'd have to be really far back because they won't line up. Perspective. There's the alignment. All right, so now we have that. If we want to obscure it even more, we could start to play with like this letter T again and duplicate that and call this, let's give it the name obscure. And then we'll change the actual texture on the color to, let's just go blue, something different. And we can pull that to a place where it might block out part like that. And we'll just start duplicating that everywhere. Just finding the right places to put it. Yeah, something like that. So you see how it'll, yeah, so like right there, and then over, which starts, it won't matter. It kind of helps in some ways. It can help a line, but it'll make it look really strange once we get this lined out. You can put one back there. The idea is sort of create these, it's like a forest of parts or trees. In fact, you can even have it just hidden. It'll just, but from other angles, it'll show up like a tree in the woods. Let's see. And you can play around with the scales on these too. A couple more, just to give you the idea. So some things, you gotta be careful because we're obscuring too much there. Let's go back and across. That's the last one. Nope. Oh. Yeah. It's okay if it just barely shows. I'll move it there. And do another. we'll shift that and then pull it forward to like there. And that's where you can see it starting to collide with the other object, which is okay, because it's behind that part, and it actually helps to separate the S a little bit. Then we'll put some in this general area. So clone again and put it up, pull it over. So it's like the N shape. There we go. So now we've got these blue shapes. They add some level of complexity to it, and help us define the alignment at the same time. Okay. All right, so now the trick is to get this so that we can put it into our AR and actually try to find it using the phone's position. Okay, so to do that, all you have to do is export as HTML or GLTF if you want to do it as an imported model, but we're going to do it as HTML. It's going to save it. Usually it'll be in my download folder, so I don't want to open that. I want to go to my downloads. There it is. So if I open that with my notepad, I'll see that now I've got this exported HTML, and I've got my letter T right here. It's an entity. So it's all outside of my diorama. So if I want to make it so that I can turn it off and on, I just need to copy all of these letters down to the last entity with a material here. I can copy that. I can go into my original index here and just paste it inside of this entity. So this is an empty entity that I can scale. It's at 111 now, and all of my letter forms are inside of that entity as something that it's like a grouping. I can save that, and now if we open up our browser, actually if we go back to the assets, we'll go back out. No, that's not it. That's my downloads folder. If we go back to to the light folder, this index now should have, if I look at it, open with Google. Again, Control-Alt-I, and you can see the A entity now has some stuff inside of it, and it's hidden. If we turn it on, there's our forms, and you just have to be in the right position to see them. So we can hide that, turn that off. Now if I want to test this in the Mozilla XR Viewer, I just need to upload it to some hosted site so I can actually browse to it. So I'm going to put it up on my website, and then I'll show you what it looks like on the actual phone. So let me do that real quick. Just FTP it. Let's find it. And overwrite the one that I had. Alright, so now that's up on the site, and I'll show you. I'm going to have to video my iPad from my phone, see if it works, but I'll cut to that and I'll show you what it looks like in a sec. Alright. Okay, so I got outside so I could show this better because we need to get some room. The idea, let me get it on something dark. Got all this reflection. All right, so when you, let me restart the, all right, so when it first comes in, it's going to say AR session started. You move around until it finds the ground, and then it's going to pop up that little reticle, and then you can click on that, and you should figure out where we're at in terms of the view. So it's probably trying to figure out which is the right view. I think I need to get over on this direction. I should have remembered this better, but yeah, this looks right. So if you get low enough and in the right position, you can start to line it up. And you get the beginning of the letters spelled out. Takes a little trick, and you can make it bigger too. Like I told you, it was based on meters. So right now you can tell like the objects that I've made are in the world at about a foot each, or a little bit smaller maybe, in terms of what we're seeing for space. If we made it really big, you'd have to look and find the position, you know, the letters, and scan across them to see the position. So anyway, that's making AR content using XRViewer and A-Frame, using the A-Frame inspector without having to do much coding. Hope you liked the video.